When I have a piece of fabric left over after a project, I look at it and see what am I going to do with it. This piece of fabric is quite substantial, and I don't want to just put it into a bits bin. I can make a couple of 12.5-inch squares, and like I always try to do with leftover bits, I try to make the biggest square possible and save it in a storage area and keep them flat, and I will be able to use them later on. And when I'm ready to make a project like this Quilt As You Go project, I've got a whole bunch of 12.5 squares pre-cut. It makes sense to save them and keep them until you have a project in mind. Here's how I made this project. Today I'm going to tell you all about my leftovers. Whenever I finish a project, I have a little pile of fabric bits left over on the tabletop. And instead of throwing them into a bin and having a huge pile of leftovers, I do something with them right away. One of my favorite things to do is just to randomly sew all of these bits and pieces together. I can put them up on my wall. I can make them into one big quilt top. But whenever I do it this way, I have to get a big backing and a full piece of batting. And since I have lots of batting pieces, my favorite thing to do is quilt as you go. So what I do is I start with my backing fabric. Usually these are pieces like fat quarters, or they're leftover pieces from bigger units. And then I will pick out the colors that I want for my backing. Then I pick out my batting. And I layer them together and put them on the wall with the fabric side out so I can see what I'm doing. But I'm going to step this up another notch and add a little strip of black and white checkerboard fabric on the top as my method of quilting these. This little bit of black and white fabric unifies the whole color menagerie and creates something that is much more calming and really useful. It's easy to do. So one of the fabrics I have in my little arsenal of tricks is this piece of fabric that is a Michael Miller fabric, and the pattern is called Checks. It's hashtag making it fun. Well, jolly good. It really does make it fun. And what I'm doing is I am cutting 1-inch strips. Whenever I find this fabric in the store, I will buy myself about 2 or 3 meters of it and keep it in my stash because it's one of my very favorite fabrics. So once I cut a bunch of 1-inch strips, I have the task of folding the edges under so I can sew them onto my quilt sandwich. So from my little kit, I have a bias tape device maker. I'm not quite sure what it's called, but I've had this for a lot of years. 30 years I've had this. I have 2 different sizes. This one uses 1-inch strips of fabric, and the other one makes wider bias tape. That would be 2.5 inches. But this one, you have to feed your strip of fabric into the wide end and get it in there, Linda. You have to get it into the wide end. Sometimes It's a little tricky, but I use a common pin and it helps me to pull the thing through the other end. If I can't get it with my fingers, I use this little pin and there's a slit in it and it just helps to push the fabric through. And it is folded twice in towards the center. And if I lay that down on my ironing table, I can use my iron hot and I can just push that little metal device along while the iron is pressing the two folded edges to the center. And when I get to the end of the strip, I can put another one in. If you're making big bias tape for a binding and you were, or another project, and you wanted to have the whole distance of the bias tape, you can join them and it will go through the device. I just do one at a time because I am that way. That's just the way I am. So I do one at a time and I take my time and press the piece as it goes through that little metal device. When I have made a dozen or so of these, you see how nice and neatly that presses the edges into the center? Perfect. It's just, I just love this little device. I use it all the time. I looked through some of my videos and I haven't used it in any of my videos before. So I thought, oh, this is something different that you haven't seen yet. And just to clarify, I am using straight of grain fabric for this project, not bias tape. I cut this on the straight of grain because this just needs to be straight of grain to keep it sturdy when you are sewing it on the top side. Now let's go over to the sewing machine and I'll show you how I sew them on. There's a lot of seams that in the top of this block, and you start with the short ones that are going to need to be covered. I just cut each piece and pin them at both sides so that they are staying in place. And the raw edges will get sewn across with the next consecutive piece that I sew over the top of it. I pin them all on at one time, and usually I just start at one edge and sew all the way around because I can make it a consistent stitch that way. You could stop and start, stop and start, stop and start, but this way I just pin them all on. I cut them to measure just by using my scissors and pinning them down. And once I get all of these pieces pinned in place, I start at one edge and I just start sewing them on. I mean, this piece of 12.5-inch sandwich needs to be quilted, and if I can quilt it and give a decorative effect on the surface, that's sort of a win-win for me. So this stitching of this black and white fabric on top is the quilting for these blocks. And I'll show you the back side of a block as soon as I get this done. And you can see how nice it looks on the back side. It looks like it's just a geometric pattern of squares on the back, and it really looks quite nice because the backing that I've chosen isn't really a busy backing. It's quite plain, light blue, dark blue, medium blue. But you can see it on the backing, and it's quite nice. And I'm also going to use this same black and white fabric for the sashing and the binding, likely, just to give it a nice cohesive look. So I'll just zip ahead here and show you when I'm sewing. So they're all pinned on now. I'm going to start at one of the sides And I use a regular stitch that I use when I machine quilt with the walking foot anyway. It's a little longer stitch length than I would for a seam. And I do use my walking foot because I am quilting this. And I am using black thread on the top. And on the back I have a light blue because my backing is light blue. And I just go around the edges, making sure that they stay folded under, because sometimes they loosen up a little bit and they want to go free and they want to be flat again. But I just, with my finger, tuck them underneath. And I really don't have much of a difficulty going around these little squares. It's just leave the needle in the fabric and lift the presser foot and turn it. And basically, it takes me as much time to go around all these little strips of fabric as it does to quilt in a diamond pattern just with the walking foot to keep them even, or to free motion stitch. It really only takes me about 5 minutes to quilt one of these. And so I find it's a win-win situation for me because I really do like the effect of the black and white checkerboards on it. It does create a very nice effect. It unifies all of these wacky pieces of fabric and makes it kind of calm, and it gives it kind of a modern look, I think. Geometric is pretty good. I like the idea of having geometrics, and it really does look nice on the back side because the back side is quite plain. It gives the back some interest as well. I like the contrast. I like the way it makes it unified. I like the way it highlights the fabrics. It will window pane some of those fabrics and make them stand out. So if you want to get a little more intentional, you could actually use black and white to guide the eye, creating certain effects, or you can use a variety of black and white fabrics. Solid black or a different pattern. It's going to give a different effect each time you choose a different fabric. But honestly, I just like the way it looks, and I enjoy sewing these pieces together. It's quite relaxing, and it's an easy way to quilt. I usually do the quilting around the outside of these black and white strips, and then I come back and do those inside pieces. I bring the lower bobbin thread up to the top and cut them at the top side. If I let the thread go down below, it sometimes creates a little bit of a bird's nest thing at the back. So it's just a simple little trick. When I finish one block, I usually just start the next one. I have them all placed up on the wall, and I can change the positions around when it's time to sew the blocks together, the seams in the blocks seem to be too close or too conflicting. It's always easy to look at it afterwards and say, oh, I wish I would have put that block next to the other one instead of that one, because there's two colors the same side by side. So I always, before sewing all the blocks together, I always have a good look to see where I want to place them. And I also turn them over to the back side again to make sure that I haven't got two fabrics the same side by side in the back, because that annoys me just as much as the front annoys me. It's always good to have a nice looking back side. I think you can take that anywhere you want to take it. So this one is almost done. I'll put it up on the wall and show you a comparison between one that is already done and one that hasn't been checkerboarded like this one. I go to call it checkerboarding. the border. It's a cool secondary pattern. The ones that haven't been sewn like this yet seem to be just mayhem, but the ones that have the black and white border strips, it just makes it more beautiful. It completes the block look. It is not competing for attention in any way, but it just gives everything a purpose. So I guess next time you're looking at your scrap bin, don't forget those black and white fabrics. They might not be the stars of the show, but they certainly can be the secret sauce that makes everything else shine. I can leave in the notes below a number of videos that I have previously posted that show the Quilt As You Go process. I didn't put that into this video. This one was all about the colors and the patterns and leftovers. So if you want to refresh yourselves about Quilt As You Go, look in the notes and go to one of those other videos. And as always, thank you for watching my video. Thank you for leaving comments. And if you did like it, put a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. I think I have another video coming up sometime soon about more leftovers. So stay tuned. Bye for now.